The first time David Thompson saw Harmony Heights, it was like looking at a painting. Too perfect to be real. Rolling hills cascaded into meticulously manicured streets, each house a carbon copy of architectural precision. Sunlight glinted off pristine windows, and not a single blade of grass dared to stand out of line. His real estate agent, Melissa Chen, had been practically bubbling with excitement. "It's the most sought-after community in Northern California," she'd said, her perfectly manicured hand sweeping across the landscape. "The HOA here is legendary. They've maintained property values that have outpaced Silicon Valley's tech boom by nearly 30%. David had worked hard for this moment. At 38, he was a senior software engineer at a cutting-edge AI startup, and after years of 80-hour weeks and startup pressure, he wanted more than just a house. He wanted a home, a sanctuary where he could breathe, where his carefully restored 1967 Mustang could sit proudly in the driveway, where he could host weekend barbecues, and maybe, just maybe, start thinking about a family. Harmony Heights seemed perfect. The community boasted amenities that read like a luxury resort brochure. A state-of-the-art clubhouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a championship-designed tennis court. A community pool that looked like it belonged in a five-star hotel. Walking paths lined with carefully pruned trees. Security gates that opened with a personalized electronic key fob. The house itself was a dream. A modern craftsman-style home with open-concept living, smart home technology integrated seamlessly into every room, and floor-to-ceiling windows that captured the golden California sunlight. 3 bedrooms, a home office that would make any tech professional weep with joy, and a backyard that seemed to blend perfectly with the surrounding landscape. The price tag was steep, $1.2 million, but David had been saving for years. His tech stock options and disciplined saving had finally paid off. This wasn't just a purchase. It was a statement, a declaration that he had made it. During the home tour, David had met a few neighbors. They seemed friendly enough, albeit with a certain uniformity. Perfectly pressed clothes, meticulously maintained lawns, expensive but conservative cars parked at mathematically precise angles. Everyone smiled, but there was something beneath the surface. A tension, perhaps. A sense of constant vigilance. Little did David know that beneath Harmony Heights' perfect exterior lurked a homeowners association that would make military dictatorships look relaxed by comparison. The Harmony Heights Homeowners Association, HHHA, wasn't just an administrative body. It was a well-oiled machine of control, led by Victor Randolph, a man who approached community management with the same intensity a general might plan a military campaign. Victor was a retired logistics officer, tall and rail-thin, with steel-gray hair always perfectly combed and glasses that seemed permanently perched at the end of his razor-sharp nose. His deputy, Margaret Stern, was equally formidable, a former corporate compliance officer who treated the HOA rulebook like sacred text. Their reputation preceded them. Whispers among potential homebuyers spoke of legendary strictness, tales of $500 fines for grass half an inch too long, warnings about unauthorized garden decorations, stories of homeowners driven to tears by the association's relentless pursuit of absolute conformity. But David was different. He was a problem solver. In the world of software engineering, challenges were just puzzles waiting to be decoded. How hard could an HOA be? His first warning came 2 weeks after moving in. A certified letter, crisp and official, arrived in a plain white envelope. The letterhead was a work of bureaucratic art, embossed with the Harmony Heights Homeowners Association logo, a perfectly symmetrical crest that seemed to radiate authority. The violation was breathtaking in its pettiness. His welcome mat, a hand-woven piece he purchased during a transformative trip to Peru, was precisely 0.5 inches wider than the HOA's prescribed standard welcome mat dimensions. The fine, $75. David Thompson's battle with Harmony Heights had begun. David stared at the violation notice, convinced it was some kind of elaborate joke. The $75 fine for an oversized welcome mat seemed like something out of a satirical comedy sketch. He traveled the world, solved complex algorithmic challenges that stumped entire engineering teams, and now he was being fined for the width of a doormat. His first instinct was to resolve this rationally. As a software engineer, David was used to debugging complex problems. Surely, this was just a misunderstanding that could be cleared up with a simple conversation. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday. Harmony Heights Community Center was a marvel of architectural precision. All clean lines, floor-to-ceiling windows, and an interior that looked like it had been assembled by a team of perfectionists. David arrived early, the offending welcome mat tucked under his arm, ready to present his case. The meeting room was a study in controlled conformity. 12 board members sat around a massive oak table, each placed with mathematical precision. At the head sat Victor Randolph, his posture so rigid it seemed he'd been carved from granite. To his right was Margaret Stern, her fingers drumming against a thick binder of regulations that looked like it could stop a bullet. When David's turn came to speak, he approached with the calm rationality of someone used to solving complex problems. "I'm here about the welcome mat violation," he began, spreading the mat on the table. "As you can see, it's a handmade piece from Peru. It has cultural significance, and the slight deviation in width seams." Victor cut him off with a razor-sharp gesture. "Mr. Thompson, rules are rules. The welcome mat regulation exists to maintain a uniform aesthetic. Section 4.2, paragraph C of the Harmony Heights Community Guidelines clearly states that all welcome mats must be between 17 and 18 inches wide. Your mat measures 18.5 inches. Margaret leaned forward, her glasses catching the fluorescent light. "We've received complaints, Mr. Thompson. One neighbor described your mat as a visual disruption to the neighborhood's harmony." David blinked, momentarily stunned. Complaints? About a welcome mat? Victor's voice was a cold, precise instrument. "Non-compliance will result in escalating fines. $75 today. $150 next time. $300 after that. The choice is yours, Mr. Thompson. Conform or face the consequences." The other board members sat in silent, implacable judgment. David realized this was no joke. This was a system designed to crush any hint of individuality. "But it's just a welcome mat," David protested. "It's never just a welcome mat, Mr. Thompson," Victor replied, a hint of something. Triumph, disdain, flickering in his eyes. "It's about maintaining the standards that make Harmony Heights exceptional. Every deviation, no matter how small, threatens the very fabric of our community's integrity." Margaret slid a formal document across the table. It was a detailed breakdown of the violation, complete with precise measurements, photographic evidence, and a breakdown of the fine structure. David left the meeting in a state of disbelief. This couldn't be real. People didn't get fined for welcome mats. Communities didn't operate like this. But Harmony Heights was different. That evening, he called his sister, Rachel, a civil rights lawyer in San Francisco. "You're not going to believe this," he began, recounting the meeting's absurdity. Rachel's response was immediate and pointed. "Document everything. Every single communication. These HOA bylaws can be challenged, but you need evidence." Little did David know, this was just the beginning. The welcome mat was merely the first salvo in what would become an all-out war with the Harmony Heights Homeowners Association. Victor Randolph had made a critical mistake. He'd underestimated David Thompson. The welcome mat was just the beginning. Over the next 3 months, David's mailbox became a daily repository of HOA violation notices. Each letter was a masterpiece of bureaucratic harassment, meticulously detailing infractions that seemed to defy logic. The first follow-up came just 2 weeks after the welcome mat incident. A violation notice arrived citing the shade of his window shutters. Apparently, they were 0.03% darker than the approved Harmony Heights color palette. The fine, $125. Then came the recycling bin placement. David had positioned his bins 3 inches too far from the curb during collection day. Another fine, $175. The precision was almost comical if it weren't so infuriating. His rose bushes became the next target. An official measurement revealed they weren't trimmed at the precise 42-degree angle mandated by the HOA guidelines. The accompanying photograph showed a board member actually using an angle finder to measure the bush's trimming. The fine this time, $250. David began to understand the pattern. These weren't random attacks. They were systematic. Each violation was carefully calculated to wear him down, to make him feel powerless. He wasn't alone. Ellen Rodriguez, his next-door neighbor, was fighting her own battle with the HOA. A retired high school principal with a no-nonsense attitude, Ellen had received multiple violations for her small garden. Her crime? Planting marigolds that were 6 inches taller than the approved landscape height and hanging a small pride flag during June. They're bullies, Ellen told David one afternoon over coffee. Her kitchen overlooked her meticulously maintained garden, a garden that apparently didn't meet Harmony Heights' impossible standards. I've lived here for 15 years. I watched this community transform from a welcoming neighborhood to a prison of conformity. Her pride flag violation was particularly egregious. Victor Randolph had personally delivered a citation claiming the flag violated the no unauthorized exterior decorations rule. The fine was substantial, $500, with a warning that repeated violations could lead to more severe consequences. David's sister Rachel continued to advise him, "Keep everything," she'd say during their weekly calls. "Every single piece of paper, every photograph, every measurement. This level of harassment isn't normal." He created a dedicated folder, both physical and digital, documenting every single interaction with the HOA, violation notices, measurements, photographs. Each document was carefully scanned, dated, and backed up. The financial impact was becoming significant. In just 3 months, David had accumulated over $1,500 in fines. More concerning were the repeated threats about potential liens on his property and the implications of continued non-compliance. Victor Randolph's tactics were clear. This wasn't about maintaining community standards. This was about control. During one particularly heated moment, David considered selling, but something inside him refused to be beaten. This was his home. He had worked too hard, saved too long to be driven out by a petty bureaucracy. Ellen became an unexpected ally. They began documenting their experiences, sharing stories, comparing notes. They discovered they weren't alone. Other homeowners in Harmony Heights whispered about similar experiences, too afraid to speak up publicly. "They rely on fear," Ellen said one evening. "Most people just pay the fines and keep quiet. They don't want to be targeted, to be seen as troublemakers." David was beginning to realize that being seen as a troublemaker might not be such a bad thing. The breaking point was coming, and Victor Randolph had no idea what was about to hit him. The 1967 Ford Mustang wasn't just a car. It was a legacy. David's father had restored the classic vehicle during David's childhood, spending countless weekends teaching his son about engines, paint jobs, and the art of automotive restoration. When his father passed away 5 years ago, the Mustang became more than a vehicle. It was a living memory, a connection to the man who had taught him everything about perseverance, precision, and passion. And now, Victor Randolph was going to destroy that memory. The violation notice arrived on a crisp Tuesday morning, certified mail, with the Harmony Heights HOA letterhead that had become all too familiar. David's hands trembled slightly as he opened the envelope, expecting another ridiculous citation about grass height or shutter color. This was different. The notice claimed the Mustang violated multiple HOA parking regulations. Specifically, the car was parked at a 3-degree angle different from the mandated parking orientation. The citation detailed how the vehicle's positioning created visual disharmony and negatively impacted neighborhood aesthetic standards. But the real threat was buried in the final paragraph. If David did not immediately correct the parking violation, the HOA would have the vehicle towed at his expense. The towing fee alone would be $750, with additional storage costs of $50 per day. More alarming was the fine print. The HOA reserved the right to place a lien on his property for continued non-compliance. "This is insane," David muttered, spreading the documents across his kitchen counter. The citation included a precisely measured diagram showing the Mustang's current parking angle versus the approved parking orientation. Ellen Rodriguez saw him outside, examining the documents. She walked over, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. "They're trying to break you," she said flatly. It wasn't a question. David's mind raced. The Mustang was more than just a car. It represented memories of his father, of weekends spent in the garage learning about mechanics, about life. Every dent, every scratch told a story. And now the HOA wanted to tow it away over a 3-degree parking angle. Victor Randolph's letter gave him explicit instructions. The car must be parked at a precise 90-degree angle to the curb, with no more than a 0.5-degree variance. Any deviation would result in immediate action. When David called the HOA office, Victor himself answered. His voice was cold, clinical, the voice of someone who derived pleasure from enforcing senseless rules. "Mr. Thompson," Victor began, "the regulations are clear. Your vehicle's positioning is a violation of Section 7, Paragraph 3 of the Harmony Heights Community Guidelines. We cannot allow individual homeowners to compromise the visual integrity of our community." "It's a parking angle," David replied, struggling to keep his voice calm. "A 3-degree difference. This is absurd." Victor's response was chilling. "Non-compliance will result in immediate action. The tow truck is already on standby. You have 48 hours to correct the violation." Something inside David snapped. This wasn't about a parking angle. This was about control, about crushing individual spirit beneath the weight of bureaucratic tyranny. He looked at the Mustang, his father's legacy, and made a decision. This was war. Rachel, his lawyer sister, was going to help him fight back, and Victor Randolph had no idea what was coming. David's sister Rachel arrived the following weekend, her briefcase packed with legal ammunition. A civil rights attorney with a reputation for taking on impossible cases, she had that familiar Thompson family look of quiet determination. "Tech skills and legal knowledge," she said, spreading documents across his kitchen table. "That's our weapon." Their investigation began methodically. David's software engineering background proved crucial. He wrote custom scripts to scrape and analyze public records, diving deep into the Harmony Heights HOA's financial and administrative history. The first red flag emerged quickly, a pattern of suspicious property transactions that defied simple explanation. Homes seized for HOA violations were mysteriously sold at below-market rates to a network of shell companies, each company traced back to board members or their close associates. "This isn't just harassment," Rachel muttered, reviewing the data. "This looks like systematic property fraud." Ellen Rodriguez became their first ally. Her decades of experience as a high school principal had honed her investigative skills. She began reaching out to longtime residents, collecting stories of HOA abuse that had been whispered but never documented. David created a secure website, initially just a documentation platform. Harmony Heights Truth became a digital repository of every HOA violation, every questionable fine, every bizarre regulation. He implemented robust encryption, ensuring anonymity for those afraid to speak out. The first week, only a handful of homeowners shared their stories. By the second week, the site had hundreds of submissions. Patterns emerged. The HOA seemed to target newer residents, homeowners from diverse backgrounds, properties with potential high resale value, anyone who questioned their authority. Victor Randolph's tactics became clear. This wasn't about community standards. It was a sophisticated scheme of property control and financial manipulation. Rachel contacted local investigative journalists. Sarah Chen from the Silicon Valley Herald was the first to bite. An award-winning reporter with a reputation for exposing systemic corruption, she saw the potential for a groundbreaking story. "These aren't just violations," Sarah told them during a clandestine meeting at a local coffee shop. "This looks like a systematic effort to devalue properties and force sales." The evidence was mounting. Financial records showed kickbacks. Shell companies linked board members to suspicious real estate transactions. Violation fines seemed strategically designed to financially pressure homeowners. David's tech skills became their primary weapon. He created data visualization tools that made the complex web of HOA corruption startlingly clear. Graphs demonstrated how violation fines correlated with property values. Flowcharts exposed the interconnected shell companies. "We need more than just a website," Rachel advised. "We need legal documentation, sworn statements, hard evidence." An anonymous source, a current HOA board member uncomfortable with the organization's tactics, began feeding them internal documents. Each leak was carefully vetted, cross-referenced, verified. The community began to change. Homeowners who had previously been silent started speaking up. The Harmony Heights Truth website became a beacon of hope for those feeling powerless against the HOA's tyranny. Victor Randolph had no idea what was coming. The fight back wasn't just about David's Mustang or Welcome Mat anymore. It was about exposing a system of corruption that had controlled an entire community through fear and bureaucratic intimidation. "They picked the wrong family to mess with," Rachel said, a dangerous glint in her eye. The war had begun. The first crack in the HOA's armor appeared during a routine board meeting. Marcus Jenkins, the youngest board member, had been wrestling with his conscience for months. A local real estate agent in his mid-30s, he'd initially joined the board believing he could make a positive difference. Now he realized he was part of something far more sinister. The meeting was typical, or so it seemed. Victor Randolph sat at the head of the table, his usual commanding presence filling the room. Margaret Stern took meticulous notes, her pen moving with mechanical precision. But something was different. Marcus could feel the tension, the subtle shifts in body language. When the discussion turned to the growing number of complaints about the website, Harmony Heights Truth, Victor's composure began to crack. "We cannot let this continue," Victor hissed, slamming a folder onto the table. "Thompson and his sister are undermining everything we've built." That's when Margaret spoke up. "We might need to be more careful," she said, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "The journalist from the Silicon Valley Herald is asking questions." Victor's response was swift and brutal. "We shut it down, by any means necessary." Marcus realized this was his moment. The anonymous documents he'd been collecting, financial records, email chains, internal communications, suddenly felt like a weapon of truth. The next day, an avalanche of information began to pour out. Sarah Chen from the Silicon Valley Herald published her first expose. The headline was devastating: "Harmony Heights HOA, a system of systematic property fraud exposed." The article detailed everything: how the HOA systematically targeted homeowners, issuing increasingly ridiculous violations, how properties were strategically devalued, how shell companies connected to board members would swoop in and purchase properties at rock-bottom prices. Victor's network began to crumble. 2 board members resigned immediately. Anonymous sources within the community started coming forward, each story more damning than the last. The website David created became a central hub for homeowners to share their experiences. But Victor wasn't going down without a fight. He attempted to file a defamation lawsuit against David, Rachel, and the website. It was a desperate move, and everyone knew it. The lawsuit would only draw more attention to the HOA's corrupt practices. Marcus Jenkins became the key witness. During a confidential meeting with state housing investigators, he revealed everything. Detailed records of how the HOA systematically targeted specific homeowners, financial trails showing kickbacks, email chains documenting the deliberate strategy of harassment. It was never about community standards, Marcus told the investigators. It was about control, about money. The State Housing Board launched a full investigation. Local news picked up the story. What had started as David's personal battle against an unreasonable HOA had become a full-blown expose of systemic corruption. Victor Randolph's carefully constructed world began to collapse. Emergency meetings were called, lawyers were consulted, but the evidence was overwhelming. Years of meticulous documentation, digital forensics, and witness testimonies created an insurmountable case. The Harmony Heights HOA was about to face its reckoning. David watched the events unfold, a mix of vindication and disbelief washing over him. What had started with a welcome mat violation was now a full-scale investigation into community-wide corruption. Victor had made one critical mistake. He had underestimated the power of someone who was willing to fight back. The final act was yet to come. The community center had never seen anything like it. Over 300 Harmony Heights residents packed the massive room, standing room only, a sea of faces united by years of suppressed anger and frustration. What was supposed to be a routine HOA annual meeting had transformed into a public tribunal. State housing investigators sat at a long table at the front of the room. Sarah Chin from the Silicon Valley Herald occupied a strategic position, her notebook ready. Rachel Thompson stood nearby, looking like a warrior preparing for battle. Victor Randolph entered the room, and the temperature seemed to drop. Gone was his usual military-precise swagger. Now he looked small, diminished. Margaret Stern was conspicuously absent. Rumors suggested she had already cut a deal with investigators. The State Housing Board representative, Elizabeth Martinez, spoke first. Her voice was calm but carried the weight of official authority. "We have conducted a comprehensive investigation into the Harmony Heights Homeowners Association," she began. "Our findings are deeply troubling." The evidence was devastating. Years of systematic harassment, financial fraud, and deliberate property devaluation laid bare for everyone to see. Spreadsheets projected on massive screens showed complex networks of shell companies. Financial trails revealed kickback schemes. Violation records demonstrated a calculated pattern of targeting specific homeowners. Marcus Jenkins, the former board member turned whistleblower, took the stand. His testimony was a knife cutting through Victor's carefully constructed facade. It was never about community standards, Marcus declared, his voice echoing through the silent room. It was about control, about creating a system where we could manipulate property values, force sales, and profit from homeowners' misery. David sat in the front row, the restored Mustang key chain dangling from his belt, a reminder of how this all began. Victor attempted to defend himself, but his arguments crumbled under the weight of documented evidence. Each time he tried to deflect, another piece of evidence emerged: email chains, financial records, sworn testimonies. The most dramatic moment came when an elderly resident, Martha Rodriguez, approached the microphone. She had lived in Harmony Heights for over 40 years and had watched the community transform. "I've seen good people driven out," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "People who built this community, people who loved their homes, all because of a system designed to crush their spirit." Her testimony broke something in the room. The collective anger was palpable. State investigators outlined the proposed actions: complete dissolution of the current HOA board, mandatory repayment of all improper fines, criminal investigations into potential fraud, establishment of a new democratically elected community governance model. Victor Randolph sat in stunned silence. The man who had ruled Harmony Heights with an iron fist was now powerless. Rachel leaned over to David. "Sometimes," she whispered, "the system actually works." The vote was unanimous. Every single resident present, save for Victor and his remaining loyalists, raised their hand in support of the investigators' recommendations. Harmony Heights would never be the same. As the meeting concluded, David looked down at the Mustang key chain. His father would have been proud, not just of the car's restoration, but of standing up against injustice. The final chapter was yet to be written, but for now, justice had been served. 6 months after the explosive community meeting, Harmony Heights was unrecognizable. The fallout from the HOA investigation was comprehensive. Victor Randolph faced multiple legal charges: fraud, extortion, and abuse of power. Margaret Stern had cut a deal with prosecutors, providing testimony that sealed Victor's fate. The criminal proceedings became a local sensation, a cautionary tale of bureaucratic corruption. David's Harmony Heights Truth website transformed into a community resource. What began as a documentation platform became a model for homeowner advocacy, inspiring similar investigations in communities across California. The new HOA board was a radical departure from the previous regime. Democratically elected, with term limits and unprecedented transparency, it included residents from diverse backgrounds. Ellen Rodriguez, the retired principal who had been one of the first to stand up to Victor, now served as board president. David's restored 1967 Mustang, the car that had sparked one of the most significant violations, became something of a local symbol. He often parked it precisely at a 90-degree angle, a tongue-in-cheek reminder of the absurdity they had overcome. Financial restitution was substantial. Homeowners who had been unfairly fined received full refunds with interest. The shell companies were dismantled, their assets seized. Properties that had been manipulated were evaluated and, where necessary, restored to their true market value. Marcus Jenkins, the whistleblower, found unexpected redemption. Instead of being ostracized, he was celebrated as a community hero. His real estate business flourished as people recognized his integrity. Rachel Thompson's role in the investigation brought her national recognition. Civil rights attorneys across the country began referencing the Harmony Heights case as a landmark example of systemic community corruption. The most surprising transformation was within the community itself. Neighbors who had previously been isolated, afraid to speak out, now knew each other. Block parties replaced formal HOA meetings. Community support replaced bureaucratic control. On the one-year anniversary of the HOA's downfall, a community gathering was held. David was asked to speak, the unlikely hero who had started with a simple fight over a welcome mat. It was never about winning, he told the crowd. It was about standing up, about refusing to be bullied, about remembering that a community is made of people, not rules. Victor Randolph's final legal appeal was denied. He received a 5-year prison sentence, his professional reputation in tatters. The man who had once ruled Harmony Heights through fear now watched his empire crumble from a prison cell. The welcome mat that had started it all, David had it framed. It hung in the community center, a reminder of how small acts of resistance can create massive change. Sarah Chen's investigative series won a prestigious journalism award. Her reporting had not just exposed corruption in one community, but had sparked conversations about HOA power dynamics nationwide. As for the Mustang, David's father's legacy, it remained a centerpiece of his home. Sometimes, late at night, he would sit in the garage, running his hands over the car's restored bodywork, thinking about the journey. One small act of defiance had brought down an entire system of corruption. Harmony Heights was no longer just a name on a sign. It had become a true community, open, supportive, democratic. Sometimes, David reflected, the most powerful weapon against injustice is simply refusing to be silent. *The end*.